we'll talk more about this indictment. I mean, this is a big deal. One of the interesting things about these indictments, there are, well, let's play play this clip of Special Counsel Jack Smith and his announcement. I think this is, certainly there have been surprises in this indictment, without a doubt. I think there's some surprise maybe that we ultimately got to this place. Certainly, Merrick Garland did not want to when he first got into office. I think that's pretty clear. But you can't allow an attempted violent overthrow of the government to go unpunished, or at least an attempt to bring charges. And on that note, as whether it was an attempted overthrow of the government, the indictment has some things to say about that we have not heard before. But first, here's Jack Smith.
Good evening. Today, an indictment was unsealed, charging Donald J. Trump with conspiring to defraud the United States, conspiring to disenfranchise voters, and conspiring and attempting to obstruct an official proceeding. The indictment was issued by a grand jury of citizens here in the District of Columbia, and it sets forth the crimes charged in detail. I encourage everyone to read it in full. The attack on our nation's capital on January 6th, 2021 was an unprecedented assault on the seat of American democracy. As described in the indictment, it was fueled by lies. Lies by the defendant targeted at obstructing a bedrock function of the U.S. government, the nation's process of collecting, counting, and certifying the results of the presidential election.
The indictment names 6 co-conspirators. And as of this moment, 5 of them have been identified and have, or at least by the potential co-conspirators themselves or their attorneys. Rudy Giuliani, conspirator 1, co-conspirator 1, I should say. John Eastman, co-conspirator 2. John Eastman was the constitutional lawyer, had the theory about the independent legislatures, and was brought in for a couple of hours. He was the one who was in for hours and hours with Mike Pence. And trying to convince Mike Pence to do this. Or Mike Pence was trying to find out, could he do this? Sidney Powell, a conservative lawyer who has, more or less lost her mind, may have lost her mind before then. This is a key one, though. Jeffrey Clark, he's a Justice Department lawyer. You've heard the name before, I think, if you remember, who pressed people in the DOJ to sow doubt about the election results. And then Ken Chesebro, an architect of the fake elector strategy. The 6th alleged co-conspirator, nobody knows who it is. Some people suspect that it's Stone, but nobody knows. We'll go deeper into this, but I want to read one thing that I think really goes to the heart of how seriously some people took this. There's no doubt that we're dealing with, on some measure, Keystone cops. On some measure. But again, John Eastman is in Mike Pence's office just days before for hours and hours. And if Mike Pence was having none of it, remember Mike Pence called Dan Quayle, who he probably was, friends with. I think Quayle was from Indiana as well. And if I remember correctly, Quayle was vice president. He's calling Dan Quayle, and he's not calling Dan Quayle because he's saying hey, we got a problem here. He's saying, can I do this? And then Eastman comes in, and if Pence was I will not do this, that meeting would have lasted 15 minutes. But instead, they're in there. Well, can I really do this? Can I really do this? Explain to me how this happens. He was entertaining it. But the real damning, I think, evidence of just how serious this was And there's a lot of things that are left out of the indictment. Any potential relationship between Trump and like the Oath Keepers or the Proud Boys through intermediaries, none of that's mentioned. No one like Bannon or Stone is mentioned in the indictment. I think he kept this clean to just down to like what they could absolutely 100% prove, which makes sense. But this from the indictment, paragraph 81, on the afternoon of January 3rd, co-conspirator number 4. Co-conspirator number 4 is Jeffrey Clark. He was a Justice Department lawyer. The previous month, the deputy White House counsel had informed the defendant, that's Trump, that there is no world, there is no option in which you do not leave the White House on January 20th. Whoever that deputy White House counsel was, we're not sure. I mean, maybe people have some speculation. But now the same deputy White House counsel tried to dissuade co-conspirator 4, that's Jeffrey Clark, DOJ lawyer, from assuming the role of acting attorney general. The deputy White House counsel reiterated to co-conspirator 4 that there had not been outcome determinative fraud in the election, and that if the defendant, Trump, remained in office nonetheless, there would be, quote, riots in every major city in the United States. Co-conspirator 4, Jeffrey Clark, responded, well, guy who's saying this to me, or that's why there's an Insurrection Act. Now, the other thing that the indictment shows is that Clark was in fact appointed acting DOJ. And what happened after he appoints him, because there is some, like, I guess, internal documents that show him as acting attorney general. As soon as he did that, there was a mass threat of firing. This is prosecutors say Trump offered, this is from Politico, and Clark accepted the job of acting attorney general on January 3rd, 2021, that same day. The Select Committee found phone records listing Clark as acting attorney general before Trump rescinded the appointment under threat of mass resignations. I guess it was Pat Philbin. Prosecutors say that Pat Philbin, Trump's deputy White House counsel, warned Clark that if he and Trump pressed ahead with plans to stay in power past Biden's scheduled inauguration, there would be riots in the streets. And he said that's why we have an Insurrection Act. Now, that guy ultimately couldn't be the DOJ because there was going to be mass resignations, so Trump rescinded the appointment. But it's quite clear there was a plan here.
Intent.
Oh, there's intent.
Yeah.
But there's also a plan, like a clear plan.
Right.
We'll have more to talk about this, obviously, as the show goes on. This is big news. It's unclear how quickly we will get to a trial and what would happen if there's a conviction and appeals, et cetera, et cetera. But the judge who's overseeing this case, we should say, has sent many people to jail for their breaking into the Capitol building. And the defense that they thought the election was stolen has not worked out very well for those people. So this is serious. I know it was just a bunch of boomers going on a stroll.
A tour that got a little bit too rowdy.